All right, so we're diving into happiness today. All those excerpts from Authentic Happiness, it really got me thinking, what actually makes us happy? I mean, besides the quick sugar rush,
Hmm.
what really brings that lasting fulfillment?
You're right on the money there. We're talking about flourishing, not just like those fleeting happy moments. And the cool thing, Seligman says there's real science behind it.
That's what I find so interesting, this shift in psychology,
Mm.
from just fixing problems to actually understanding how we thrive. Like instead of just patching up a flat tire, it's about building like a high-performance engine for life.
Yeah, exactly. For so long, psychology focused on mental illness, right? What was wrong? But positive psychology, it flips the script. It's all about building strengths, understanding what makes life worth living.
Okay, so less fixing, more thriving. I like the sound of that. Speaking of thriving, there's this crazy study about nuns in the book. Apparently, the amount of positive emotions they showed in their early writings predicted how long they lived. Nuns, the key to longevity. Who knew?
Oh, it's a fascinating study. It really shows that strong link between positive emotions and well-being. These nuns who are expressing more joy, gratitude, love, they lived longer. Pretty compelling stuff. It shows happiness isn't just like a fleeting feeling. It has a real impact.
Wow, that's pretty profound. But then there's this whole hedonic treadmill thing. We get that new car, that promotion, and boom, we're on cloud nine for about 5 minutes. Then it's back to square one, wanting more, chasing this, like, happiness carrot on a stick.
Yeah, the hedonic treadmill, it's a real challenge. We adapt to good things, which can be helpful, but it also means we have to be mindful about how we chase happiness. Like, if we're always after that next shiny thing, we could miss those deeper, more fulfilling sources.
Okay, so how do we get off this treadmill? So Ligman has that happiness formula, right?
He does. It's actually pretty simple, though, maybe not so easy to put into practice. He says happiness is like a three-legged stool. It's held up by genetics, circumstances, and then the actions we choose to take.
All right, let's break down this stool analogy. What's the deal with genetics?
Think of it like your height. You inherit a potential range, right? And while you can influence how tall you grow with nutrition and stuff, you're probably not going to be a 7-foot basketball star if your genes have other plans. Happiness, it's similar. We all have this genetic range for happiness, like a baseline we tend towards.
So even if I win the lottery, my happiness levels might jump up, but they'll eventually settle back down to, like, my predetermined setting.
Exactly. It's pretty wild, isn't it? Which is why those other two legs of the stool are so crucial. The circumstances we can control and the actions we choose to take.
So money doesn't buy happiness, huh? That's kind of cliche, but is there truth to it?
Well, it's more nuanced than that. Money definitely helps, especially for basic needs and security. But research shows once you hit a certain income level, more money doesn't equal more happiness. It's diminishing returns. Like buying a 10th pair of shoes just won't bring the same joy as the first.
Okay, that makes sense. What about things like relationships? Does being married, having a strong social circle, does that make a difference?
Absolutely. Strong social connections, especially marriage, are linked to higher happiness levels. Now, it's not a magic solution. A bad relationship can really drag you down, but the data clearly shows a connection between good relationships and well-being.
Okay, so we have our genetic set point, our life circumstances, which, we may or may not be able to control, and then there's this voluntary actions part of the stool. What are those exactly?
This is where things get really empowering. Voluntary actions are the choices we make, the habits we build, the activities we do that actively influence our happiness. It's about taking charge, not just letting happiness happen to us.
So less about waiting for happiness to strike and more about, like, building a life that welcomes it.
Exactly. Cultivating gratitude, practicing optimism, tapping into those unique strengths that make you you.
Okay, starting to see the bigger picture now. It's a proactive approach, not just hoping for the best, understanding the science and then making choices that, fit that knowledge.
Right. And it's not about reaching some like perfect state of bliss. It's about building a life that's fulfilling, rich in meaning, purpose, and joy.
Okay, so let's talk about the past. The book mentions the power of gratitude and how it affects our well-being. Is it really that powerful?
Gratitude is like a superpower. It's about really appreciating the good things, big or small. And when we shift our focus from what we lack to what we have, it can really change our happiness.
Seligman even talks about an experiment, gratitude night. People wrote these heartfelt thank you letters to someone important. Sounds like there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
It was powerful. Gratitude isn't just about feeling good, it's about recognizing the impact others have on us. Expressing that appreciation deepens our connections, makes relationships stronger, and creates this ripple effect of positivity.
So, focusing on the good. But what about the not so good? The baggage we carry from the past.
That's where things get a little tricky. We all have past experiences that shape us, good and bad. But holding on to bitterness or resentment, that just poisons our present.
Seligman talks about explanatory styles, right? Optimistic versus pessimistic. But it's more than just seeing the glass half full or empty, isn't it?
It is. It's about how we explain what happens to us. Optimists, they tend to see setbacks as temporary, specific, like, I messed up that presentation because I didn't prepare enough, not, I'm just a terrible presenter. Pessimists, on the other hand, see the negative as permanent, all-encompassing, which can be really disempowering.
So it's like rewiring our brains to view challenges in a more helpful light.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, optimism is a skill, something you can learn. It's not about denying reality. It's about reframing how we see things to spot possibilities instead of roadblocks.
This is fascinating. We've covered the science of happiness, this happiness formula, how our past experiences factor in. Before we move on, I'm curious about this difference Seligman makes between pleasure and gratification.
Yeah, that's key. Pleasure is immediate, fleeting, often sensory. Think like that first bite of chocolate cake. Total bliss, but it fades fast. Gratification is different. It runs deeper.
So chocolate cake versus that feeling you get after finishing a tough project.
You got it. Gratification comes from engaging in things that absorb us, challenge us, and use our strengths. That sense of flow and fulfillment from really engaging with something meaningful.
Okay, I see. Pleasure is like a sparkler, bright but short-lived. Gratification is like building a fire. Takes effort, but it gives you that sustained warmth and light.
Great analogy. Speaking of sustained warmth, let's talk about Csikszentmihalyi's idea of flow. That feeling of total absorption when you lose track of time. Ever experienced that?
Totally. Like when I get lost in writing, hours disappear. It doesn't feel like work at all. Is that flow?
Sounds like it. Flow is linked to our signature strengths, those talents and abilities that energize us when we use them, finding that perfect spot where our skills match the challenge.
Seligman talks about 24 character strengths. How do we figure out which ones are our signature strengths?
There's this awesome online assessment, the VIA Character Strength Survey, totally free, and it can pinpoint your top strengths.
I'm checking that out. Knowing your strengths feels like a cheat code for a more fulfilling life.
It kind of is. It's understanding yourself better, then using those strengths to create a life that aligns with what you value.
All right, we've covered a lot. The science of happiness, the happiness formula, the role of past experiences. Let's shift gears and talk about work and love, two of the biggest parts of life.
I'm ready when you are. Because when you see how these principles work in those areas in your professional and personal life, it can be a real game changer.
All right, let's jump in.
Well, the world of work is changing, and money is losing its power.
Wait, really? What do you mean by that?
Well, remember those studies? The ones showing that after a certain point, more money doesn't mean more happiness? That's really starting to sink in for people.
So like a shift from a money economy
Right.
to a satisfaction economy.
Exactly. People are starting to value job satisfaction and meaning in their work over just chasing those big paychecks.
So what's the secret to finding that satisfaction?
Seligman says the key is using your signature strengths in your work.
Oh, that makes sense. Like if you're naturally helpful, finding a job where you get to help people would be more fulfilling.
Precisely. And he doesn't just mean, doctors and nurses. This applies to everyone, from CEOs to secretaries. When you use your strengths at work, your job can become a calling, not just a way to earn money.
A calling. Wow, that sounds amazing.
It can be. A calling is work that you find intrinsically rewarding, something you'd want to do even if you weren't getting paid.
But how do you make that happen? How do you turn a regular job into a calling?
Seligman suggests recrafting your job. Figure out how you can use your strengths more in your current role. Like, if you're good with people and have a desk job, maybe volunteer to mentor new employees or take on something with more client interaction.
So it's about being proactive and finding creative ways to use your strengths.
Exactly. And if you're a manager, you can encourage your team to do the same. Create a workplace where people feel empowered to use their strengths and find meaning in their work.
I love that. Seems like it would benefit everyone, the individual and the company.
It does. Happier employees are more productive and more engaged, too.
This is making sense for work. But what about love? How do these signature strengths play into romantic relationships?
Well, Seligman gets into secure attachment, which we touched on before.
Right, the idea that early childhood experiences shape how we form attachments as adults.
Yeah, and he explains that people with secure attachment tend to have more fulfilling, stable relationships.
But what if you didn't have that secure attachment early on? Can you develop it later?
Great question. It's definitely tougher, but Seligman suggests you can still learn those secure attachment skills and behaviors.
So what are those skills?
Things like open communication, being emotionally responsive, the ability to trust and be vulnerable.
Sounds like important stuff for any healthy relationship.
They are, and Seligman emphasizes focusing on your partner's strengths.
Oh, I like that. It's about appreciating what's good, not trying to fix them.
Right. He even suggests an exercise. Identify your partner's top 3 strengths, then recall recent times they showed those strengths.
It's like a great idea. Cultivates appreciation and gratitude.
Exactly. And that appreciation can be a real antidote to negativity and resentment, which can be so damaging over time.
This makes sense. It's like we're putting together a toolkit for happier, more fulfilling relationships.
Yeah, like that. And remember, relationships like happiness are a journey, not a destination. It's about consistently nurturing and strengthening that connection.
Okay, we've got this toolkit for building better relationships. But what about raising happy kids? How do we apply these principles to, the little ones?
That's a great question. And Seligman really stresses how important it is to nurture positive emotions in kids right from the start. He even mentions these synchrony games that help build that strong emotional connection between parents and babies.
Synchrony games. What are those?
Basically, it's about mirroring. Like the parent copies the baby's expressions, sounds, movements. It creates this beautiful dance of connection, builds that sense of shared joy and understanding.
Oh, that's so cute. I can just picture it. But Seligman also cautions against too much praise and, unclear punishment. Why is that?
He says that while praise can be good, too much of it, especially if it's not specific, can actually backfire. Kids need to learn that their actions have consequences. Not everything they do is, award-worthy.
Right. We don't want a generation of praise junkies.
Exactly. And when it comes to discipline, Seligman's big on clear boundaries and predictable consequences. He even compares it to animal studies, where unpredictable punishment just leads to anxiety and fear.
So it's about creating a safe, loving environment where kids know the rules and what to expect.
Yeah, finding that balance between warmth and affection with clear limits and consequences, teaching them how to navigate the world with resilience and confidence.
Okay, I'm seeing how all of this applies to different areas of life. Understanding the science of happiness, and then using it to make choices, whether it's our relationships, our jobs, or how we raise kids.
Absolutely. And remember, happiness isn't a destination, it's this ongoing journey. Making those conscious choices day after day to build a life that reflects our values and supports our well-being.
We've talked about a lot of different elements, our genetics, our circumstances, the actions we take. But Seligman keeps coming back to signature strengths. Why are those so important?
It's like we all have these unique strengths, these character traits that are basically us. They're the things that come naturally, that we're good at, that energize us when we use them.
So it's not just about being good at something. It's about feeling energized, alive when you're doing it.
Yes. Think about things that make you lose track of time, where you get so absorbed you forget about everything else. You're probably using one or more of your signature strengths in those moments.
That makes sense. But with 24 character strengths, how do we know which ones are ours? How do we figure that out?
There's this really cool tool, the VIA Character Strength Survey. It's a free online assessment, helps you figure out your top strength, like a personality test, but for your positive qualities.
Oh, I'm definitely taking that. Sounds like a fun way to learn more about myself.
It is. And once you know your signature strengths, you can start thinking about how to use them in different parts of your life. Work, relationships, hobbies, even parenting.
So it's about aligning what we do with what we believe in, using our strengths to make life both fulfilling and meaningful.
That's it. It's about understanding who we are at our core and living a life that honors those strengths.
This is so insightful. We're not just talking about feeling good, but becoming better versions of ourselves.
Love that. That's what positive psychology is all about. Growth, flourishing, reaching our full potential as human beings.
Now that we've laid this groundwork, let's explore this final piece. Meaning and purpose. It feels like the culmination of everything we've been talking about.
You're right. Finding meaning and purpose is often seen as the peak of human experience. It gives our lives direction, importance, that feeling of being part of something bigger than ourselves.
And Seligman goes beyond just saying, find your passion. He connects meaning to our signature strengths, right?
He does. He argues that a truly meaningful life is more than just personal happiness. It's about linking our strengths to a cause, a mission, something bigger than ourselves, making a positive impact on the world.
Sounds fulfilling, but how do we actually find that purpose? Feels like such a big question.
It is a big question, no one right answer. But Seligman suggests it often comes from aligning our strengths with something that really resonates with our values, like a cause or a mission.
So it could be anything from volunteering to choosing a career that makes a difference.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot where our passions meet our desire to contribute. Asking ourselves, how can I use my unique gifts to make the world a better place?
This reminds me of recrafting our work, which we talked about before. Is there a connection there?
Absolutely. Recrafting work isn't just about making our jobs more enjoyable, it's also about aligning them with our values and our purpose.
So if we're feeling unfulfilled at work, it might be a sign that we need to connect it to something more meaningful.
That's a good point. It's about asking ourselves, how can I use my strength to make a positive impact in this role? Or, if that's not possible, maybe it's time to explore other options that better fit our values.
This is all coming together so well. It's like we're building this roadmap to a life that's not just happy, but meaningful and fulfilling.
That's a great way to put it. Positive psychology gives us the tools and insights to create lives that are both happy and purposeful.
This has been so enriching. I feel inspired to take action and apply these principles to my own life. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing. Seligman says happiness isn't just about feeling good, it's about living a virtuous life. Can you explain that a little?
Such an important point. Seligman argues that true happiness is tied to virtue. It's about using our strengths not just for ourselves, but to do good, to contribute to something bigger.
So it's not just self-improvement, it's about making a positive impact on the world.
Exactly. Recognizing that our actions have ripple effects. When we act with kindness, generosity, courage, integrity, it inspires others, creates this positive cycle that benefits not just us, but our communities and the world.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener. Feels like Seligman gave us this blueprint for a life well lived, filled with joy, meaning, and purpose.
And the best part, this blueprint is for everyone. It's not about special talents or perfect circumstances. It's about understanding positive psychology and making choices to apply it to our lives.
So where do we go from here? What's one thing our listener can take away from this to start creating a happier, more fulfilling life?
The biggest takeaway, you can choose happiness. It's not something that just happens, you actively create it. By understanding the science, by cultivating gratitude, practicing optimism, using your strengths, connecting to something larger than yourself, you can build a life that's truly rich with joy, meaning, and purpose.
That's empowering. It
Yeah.
reminds us we all have the power to make our lives worth living, no matter what our circumstances are.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's progress over perfection. Small, consistent efforts, day after day, to build a life that reflects your values and supports your well-being.
This has been so enlightening. I have a whole new perspective on happiness and well-being. Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure. Positive psychology is a journey, not a destination. And it's a journey we can all take together.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the science of happiness. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we have. For more such contents, go to our channel, Pages and Perspectives. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for the latest updates.